Two Chairs No Waiting, episode number 119, African Americans in Mayberry. Two Chairs No Waiting is brought to you each week by weaversdepartmentstore.com. Drop by over at Weavers and pick up some of your favorite Mayberry items, CDs, t-shirts, ties, DVDs, all kinds of stuff over there at weaversdepartmentstore.com. Two Chairs No Waiting is also brought to you by donations from listeners just like you. The executive producer for Two Chairs No Waiting, episode number 119, is Jan Newsom, my lovely wife, Jan. So thank you, Jan, for your support. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Two Chairs No Waiting. I'm your host, Alan Newsom, and we really appreciate you taking time to spend here with me in Mayberry. I really appreciate that. And hey, tonight's episode is African Americans in Mayberry. Well, you know, today happens to be, the day I'm recording this, is Martin Luther King Jr. Day here in the United States, 2011. And so it really got me thinking, because this topic comes up every so often on the Who's Been Messing Up the Bulletin Board Digest, the daily email newsletter or email mailing list that comes out every day. It comes out every so often about, were there no black people in Mayberry? Where were they? And so it always comes up, and a lot of people don't watch color episodes. So if you do watch the color episodes, you would have noticed over time that there is at least one episode that does feature prominently a black person, and it's a black man. And in this case, it's in the 7th season. It's an episode of the Andy Griffith Show called, let's see if I can pull this up here real quick. It's called Opie's Piano Lessons. So you have Opie's Piano Lessons, and the character's name is Flip Conroy. Well, Flip Conroy was a ex-New York Giant. So he had come back to Mayberry. He was an ex-New York Giant, and he came back to Mayberry to run his father's business. But he was also going to volunteer as the football coach for Opie's football team. Well, on the football team, Opie was the quarterback. Well, Flip Conroy, the actor's name who played him was Rockne Tarkington, was going to coach. Well, this is a big honor. You know, you got a professional football coach, the hometown guy, coming back to Mayberry to be the coach for your football team. Now, this was not a football team that was like an organized team or something. This was more of a, it looked like a pickup team or something. And he had agreed to volunteer to do this. Well, you may remember, it's Opie's Piano Lessons, the name of the episode. And like I said, it was in the seventh season. And, you know, in that episode, it was the 215th episode of the Andy Griffith Show, by the way, just in case you wanted to know. But in that episode, Opie had already agreed, or, you know, said that he would take piano lessons from Clara. Well, Clara had an opening in the teaching piano, and he really wanted to learn. And but that was before he found out that Flip Conroy is coming back to be his football coach. You know, man, now I'm torn, because he wants to take the piano, but he's already promised Andy that he's going to work 2 hours a day practicing on the piano. Well, you know, he's supposed to be at football practice at 4:30. Well, he didn't show up because he had to finish his piano lessons. Well, the coach, Flip Conroy, kind of got on to him, even though he saw that Opie had done well. He kind of got on Opie about, you know, everybody's got to commit. You got to work hard to be good at something. And you want to be the quarterback on the football team, you got to be here for practice. Well, you know, so Opie, he decided that he wanted to go out and be both. He wanted to do both. So he was trying to figure out what he should do. And he got his buddy Arnold to end up playing the piano for him for rehearsal so that Aunt Bee and would hear him playing. Well, he got caught. So, you know, Andy had caught him, and Andy comes back, you know, with this.
There are more important things than football.
But, Pa!
And you can't do two things at the same time and do them well. So, you will be practicing that piano every afternoon from 3:30 to 5:30. Do you understand?
Yes, Pa.
Well, as you hear, Andy was not pleased with Opie, but Flip Conroy again, professional football player coming back to run his dad's business. He went by to see Andy at his house and to try to work through this because, Andy had already said, you can't do two things and do them well. So let's just hear what Coach Conroy said.
Sheriff Taylor, I'm Flip Conroy.
Oh, come in. This is my aunt.
Hello?
How do you do?
Hi, Opie.
Hi, Coach.
I hear we have a little conflict with our practice sessions.
Yes, we do.
Well, that son of yours is sure a good football player.
I'm glad to hear that. I really am. But he's decided he wants to be a good piano player, too.
Well, there's sure nothing wrong with that.
Well, like I was explaining to him, you can't do two things at the same time and do either one of them right.
Well, there's some truth to that. On the other hand, if things are sort of planned and worked out, it's always possible to pursue several interests at the same time.
So, as you hear, Flip Conroy could play the piano, and he was a New York Giant. So I think Andy lost his point on this. And if you watch the episode, you see Opie sitting there, put his hands together and grinning really big, and Andy's just kind of leaned over the back of the couch, realizing, okay, well, I'm beat. So anyway, Flip Conroy, again, played by Rockne Tarkington, was the only primary black character on the Andy Griffith Show. He was the only one, and that's sad. But you got to remember, and we'll go into that in a few minutes here. But we'll talk about now some extras because there weren't very many black people that were featured on the Andy Griffith Show, but there were a whole lot of black people in the background. In other words, they were people that lived in Mayberry. They were around. There were extras walking around on the streets all the time behind the characters, even from the very beginning of the show. And, of course, this isn't the same as having a primary character, but we've got to remember it was a television show. And it was done to entertain us, to escape to a better place for about 30 minutes, where there were no problems. There was nothing going on that was, hurtful. Things just weren't bad. It wasn't the real world. But I believe it did and does represent a world that many of us would like to live in. A world where everyone, black, white, gypsies, whomever they were, would be treated fairly and with respect. And I believe that we saw enough of Andy Taylor's character to know that whomever it was that would have been around him would have been shown caring respect. He would have been respectful to those people and enjoyed being around them. So let's try to just show each other that same kind of caring and pretend that we live in Mayberry, so we can try to make the world just a little bit better place as we go. I think that would help. Anyway, get off my soapbox here. Let me go back to some comments we had. Now, this was from a lady who wrote into, it's called Miss Crump's Blackboard. I don't know if you've ever been there, but I'll have a link in the show notes, and you can find it if you go to the Mayberry.com front page. It's right there. It's called Bulletin Boards or Forum. Either one, I think, will get you there. But it's called Miss Crump's Blackboard. And a lady wrote in, and now this was years ago in 2008, but I kept this because it was interesting to me. And here's what she had to say. She said, people insist there are no African Americans living in Mayberry. Which again, we've already kind of gone through. And she says, I beg to differ. Season 3, episode 8, the Mayberry Band, which, let's go in here. The Mayberry Band, which was actually episode number 71 filmed, 71 aired and 71 filmed, clearly shows African-American townspeople cheering for the band in broad daylight on the streets of Mayberry. Now, if you'll remember, this was the episode where the band was trying to get to go out of town, and Mayor Stoner's going, "No way, you're horrible. There's no way I'm sending you to represent our fair city anywhere because you're terrible. You're horrible." So anyway, what she says, there's one very tall African-American male seen wearing an apron. Let's see if I can show this on the video podcast. I've got pictures of these, and these pictures will show up on the, there he is, will show up on the Facebook page. If you go to facebook.com/2chairs, you'll see these pictures if you're not watching the video. But she says there was one very tall an African-American male is wearing an apron and seems to be working, just stepping outside long enough to get a glimpse of the most distinguished band in the state per the Mayberry Stoner. Another African-American woman can also be seen at least 5 different times. Well, she's seen often, and you can see her in the background and screenshots I'm going to have. And she's standing, and she's also watching the band, and that's what she goes on to say here. Another African woman can be seen 5 different times she's standing next to a Caucasian man, is what the lady tells us. Now, the lady that wrote this, I don't know if I told you, but let me read this. I'm not sure I read all this to you. She says, "People insist that there were no African Americans living in Mayberry. And as an African American woman, how could I be interested in such a show? The Andy Griffith Show cast was all Caucasians. I beg to differ." And then she goes on and is talking about season 3, these episodes I was reading. She says that another African American woman, this one is seen there, and there's a third one. She's a petite African American lady that is seen between the band members. And she says, petite African American woman cheering loudly along with her Caucasian Mayberians along the streets of Mayberry, fist pumping in the air and clapping excitedly as this African American woman is cheering the band on in their quest to represent Mayberry in the big city of Raleigh, North Carolina. There are many other episodes where African Americans were not just seen walking down the street, but also interacting with people in the background. So there was interaction there. They weren't just walking around, in other words. So the extras were told to act like they were part of a community. Understand my subject is not about African Americans living in small towns other than the Andy Griffith Show town. My subject is strictly about black and white episodes of the greatest show ever. It was almost an unspoken way African Americans were included in the show. No names are ever seen in the credits, but African Americans were an unspoken part of Mayberry. And so I thank her for writing in. And then we had another fellow wrote in. His name was Shermy. But Shermy writes, he says, "I think the real test for a show is its overall message, rather than how many extras can be counted in the background." Although I agree that there were several, is what he says. And Mayberry, specifically Andy Taylor, was all about tolerance. Here's a guy who didn't even judge the town drunk. There's no doubt that if more African Americans had been featured in main roles, Andy would have treated them as his equal, just like he did everyone else in town. At least that's the message that comes across when you watch the show. And I agree with that, and I thank him for writing that in. A lady named Luda May, she wrote in and agreed as well. She said that was very well put. Whether it was a poor farmer or self-important mayors, Andy always saw people at their best and in best possible light and treated them kindly. He taught Opie, and by extension all of us, to judge people by the content of their character. So, I have to agree with that. I think that throughout the runs of the show, you were able to see those exact qualities in Andy. Now, I will tell you, there's some links, and I'll put them on the show notes. To one of them is from a Mayberry State of Mind chapter. They have a webpage where they've gone in and captured screenshots of people in the background and circled them and tried to point out that there were African Americans in the background walking around, interacting in crowd scenes with the cast members or with other people in the background. One in particular that he's got some screenshots of is when Ernest T was joining the Army. I don't know if you remember that, but he was in line 44, 33. If I just stood over here, I wouldn't have heard you. Anyway, there's several black young men joining the military services in that episode. And there's also, I see some here in the Gold Truck episode. And there's another website. I'll have links to these. A fellow that's called, his website's bookguy.com. And he has a whole bunch of pictures where he's done screen captures, and he's got the episode title and tells you everything about where the different people are in the background. So if you want to check them out, you can see there's a lot now. Now, granted, a lot of them are the same people, I believe, that are probably extras that work there on the lot and were in a lot of the scenes, but they're there. And I grew up in a small southern town, and honestly, there's been some comments, and if you look at the Mayberry facts from the that's on the Mayberry.com site, you'll see that somebody had written in and said the absence of black people in any town in the South is an impossibility. Did the writers deliberately script only white people for the show? Well, first off, that person that wrote that was wrong. It's not an impossibility because, honestly, the town I grew up in, there were no black people. I mean, there just weren't any. The only black people were down in the county seat, down in Fort Payne and Collinsville and all these other places. Where I grew up, I was never around any black guys, and I didn't have anything against anybody. Matter of fact, for me, the people I've met, the black guys I've met, I never have understood this. I never grew up in the time when racism was prevalent. Let me just say that. You got to remember the Andy Griffith Show was during that time, during the 60s. And we're talking about Martin Luther King today because it's Martin Luther King's, it's Martin Luther King Day. So we're talking about him. You got to remember, he was killed in April of 1968. The Andy Griffith Show, that was toward the end of its run. So during all this time when things were going rough, that's when the Andy Griffith Show was on. And I've talked before about some of the reasons I got involved doing the Mayberry.com site and doing the Who's Been Messing Up the Bulletin Board chapter. So we have that daily email that goes out. And one of the reasons that I love that is because that daily email I get from Mayberry kind of lets me forget about all the troubles and all the things I have to deal with, work, just day-to-day grind that we have to work through. And, I believe the Andy Griffith Show served that same purpose back in the 60s when it was on live, when it was new, not live, but when it was first aired, that people were able to watch that show and enjoy themselves and forget some of the troubles that, Dr. King and others were fighting to try to overcome. Not that they put them out of their mind forever, but for 30 minutes you could just breathe and get a little bit of relief and get away from dealing with those problems just for a little while. Then you have a little strength to get back in there and do what's right. So, I'm not trying to give the Andy Griffith Show credit for any kind of race relations issues, but it's an entertainment show. And as much as I love it, it is an escape to just get away and enjoy myself for just a little while and forget some of those things. So, folks, let's try to make the world a little bit more like Mayberry. Not where there aren't black people there, but where everybody's treated with respect and love, and the neighbors care about each other and reach out and try to help one another. And I think we'll be in a lot better position. So, well, folks, that's all I've got for you tonight. I'd love to hear from you about your thoughts about African Americans in Mayberry or anything else. You can call me at 888-684-8415. You can email me at floyd@mayberry.com, or you can go by twochairsnowaiting.com and leave messages there, or drop by over at facebook.com/2chairs, and you'll be able to leave messages there and see the photos and stuff, screen grabs from tonight. Folks, thank you so much for joining me. We'll see you next week on Two Chairs No Waiting, your Mayberry podcast. Bye.